Tribe, happy Friday. I'm gonna pick up where I left off. It's 2 weeks since I did the last one. It's been 14 days of fundraising meetings and bouncing around from one to another in different cafes. And actually, I can't always find the emotional space to do these. So I don't want to do one that's just mega drab for you to watch through and a list of things. So sorry, it's been 14 days. But picking up where I left off, and actually, for those of you that reached out to me after that last video, I didn't realise that my interest in Shakhtar was going to resonate so much with so many of you. From a selfish point of view, it's really cool sometimes when I get this feedback that I can see that something's landed really well with numbers of the base or key people in the base. So I do really like to get that feedback. I like feedback, good and bad, but sometimes it's nice to get the good stuff, right? I had the board meeting yesterday with the trustees, and I just wanted to give you a very sort of shortened version of the way I took them through the last quarter's worth of developments. Obviously, that last video I did was sort of addressing some of the concerns that had been raised, that people thought we were going out of business, and on the back of Mozambique. So actually, I'm going to take you through a very quick canter, because it was a 2-hour call with the trustees, to let you know where we're at, the financial position. So we're we're exactly 3 months to the last board. We're probably 6 weeks out of Mozambique, and it was like we shook the car until the doors fell off and the wheels were hanging off, and at times, our liquidity was really squashed. Like I explained to you, it was a question of holding our nerve because we knew what we were doing was right. And we've had to make some redundancies. I've talked to you about how hard that was, but the cost reduction that we've taken, plus the focused effort into fundraising, plus what Mozambique's unlocked for us now. Mozambique has changed the conversation with funders, because before we were falling through some cracks. We weren't purely a veterans organisation, we weren't purely an NGO because we didn't have enough case studies and enough outcomes to talk about. Mozambique has definitely changed that, and we've seen £300,000 worth of income in the last 3 months, which is a massive effort, considering we've had to reduce the amount of people we've got in the organisation. We're down to 8 full-time members of the team at the moment, and everyone's like a Swiss Army knife, having to do 2 or 3 different things all at once. But what that gives us now, with a reduced cost base and an increased income line, we're back up to about an 8.5-month runway, including some of the other structures I've put in place with foundations, and I won't bore you with the details. The important bit for all of you to know is that we have cash on hand and 100% pledged to April 2020 now. We've also got a very heavy pipeline developing, and I'm going to take you through just brief high-level figures on that, so you got an understanding of what's going on. But I'm going to say some really big numbers in a minute now, and what I don't want that to do is detract from the importance of low-level fundraising, because these are big numbers at the moment that are miles away from realisation. So when we start talking to you about community fundraising and how important that is, I don't want you to get lost in some of these bigger numbers, because they're different parts of the organisation. But I discussed with you about my analogy of Shackleton and laying this new marker and going after institutional cash for an endowment. Now that is getting traction, and we've got 45 million pounds worth in the pipeline just for the endowment at the moment, and that's made up of 2 chunks of 20 and a 5. The 2 chunks of 20, there is a very strong possibility of them landing. It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time to work it through, but there is a solid chance that those 2 will land, because we've got the right people in the room that got enthused by this, that just couldn't believe what you all achieved in Mozambique and Indonesia and then Wayne's Fleet, and they just got it, because we painted the picture for them in such a way that it was impossible for them not to. And the picture I always paint is you lot, because as I say every time, we are nothing without you. You are our outcomes, and by taking them through the story of the volunteer and how you volunteer and the transactional relationship between outcome and the purpose it gives us, it lit them up. Now, we could well be creating that endowment over the next 6 months, which is massive. And then I look to the wider pipeline, including that, we've got £46.5 million in the pipeline. Now, strip out those big anomalies, those 2 20s and the 5, that's still 1.6 in the pipeline, which is more than our running cost at the moment, which is roughly 1.2. There's also a significant amount of other things in those pipelines that we haven't been able to put numbers against yet, but we are. So we've pushed that runway out. We're working really hard in a really targeted manner across a high net worth support squad, across the trust and foundations work that SNPs is just making it rain in, and the bigger lumps of institutional, governmental cash that I'm working on. And it's moving the needle in the right direction again. And so that throw the dice, that thing that we had to do in Mozambique for those reasons, is paying off. So there's a snapshot of the financials for you. We are absolutely back on an even keel. We've still got a lot of work to do. I'm still just inside that 9 months worth of governance model, but we're coming back round. So hopefully that puts all of your minds at rest as to where we're at. Now, I want to quickly talk you through how I discuss the organisation with the trustees. And it's the triangulation relationship between operations, capability and funding, and roughly where those three things are, and where the frustrations, not the frustrations, where the frictions can be, and the restrictions. So we've been on this journey from roughly when I started to now in repositioning and identifying exactly what this organisation is, fully expeditionary. Sorry, someone's walked behind me, put me off. I'm going to keep going. This fully expeditionary international NGO that achieves outcomes against all the odds. Now, that is a departure from the organisation that it started out as, which was very domestically focused. And I was just explaining to the trustees that means that we have to create different training products. We're taking greater organisational risk. We need to invest more in training. And what we've seen then operationally is we've done everything through Wainfleet, DIY SOS, Mozambique. We've just done a renewables energy solution, BVI. Coming up, we've got the Congo, we've got more Mozambique operations, we've got Sierra Leone, and we've still got Indonesia on the back burner. So we have this huge main events list of operations coming up with a really wide variety of things, which is amazing. But it does show that we are doing things in more and more complex environments, and that means that we have to invest more and more in training all of you so that we can deliver what we need to do in these places. Importantly, I was taking them through that because I wanted to ensure that they knew that this wasn't necessarily focused around the domestic operations and the Caribbean type of operations that we were formed around, and smaller teams, harder to reach places, more complex environments, and there was a unanimous support that was exactly what we should be doing, because that's exactly where the need is, and that's exactly what you're all perfectly suited to deliver. So then with that operational profile, we need to look at how we develop capability. And the first thing is just sheer numbers, but then what we mean by capability. And what I mean by that is the military definition of people, equipment, training and sustaining, and that development of those things. And we're learning lessons every time we deploy. So we haven't fully invested across any capability stream yet, because each operation is teaching us something new about what we actually bring to the wider humanitarian effort. But to shorten this up, there's 750 inducted grey shirts at the moment. We've got about 2,000 registered, and that fluctuates depending on opt-in and opt-out preferences, GDPR stuff. There's 486 in the domestic operators branch. There's 143 in the international operators branch, and there's 118 in the OLC/response branch. What that means is we've got enough grey shirts to see through our operational commitments this year. But given the fact that we've just had a massive operation in Mozambique, if there was another large-scale response needed through this summer in the Caribbean or Indonesia and through the autumn, winter, or wherever else, we may struggle to mobilise enough responders. We'll wait and see. It always depends on your profile, what you're working on all the time. But if we look at how many volunteers we use through Mozambique and the fact that the numbers for Wave 4 were dropping right off, we assume we've probably burned through a lot of that response capability. So we need to create as much pull-through from that 486 into the international operators and response branch as possible. And whilst we continue to understand what our capabilities are going to be back against those 4 points of the definition. My priority is to keep investing in you all, to keep investing in your training so that you can be as flexible and agile as the disaster response requires. It's getting clearer and clearer that our place in the bigger puzzle is getting other people's outcomes where they're most needed, but that organisation can't necessarily get them. Now, we're calling that last mile logistics because that's the term that's well used in the sector, and that is what we did in Mozambique. But it needs more thinking because we were creating logistics bases in Mozambique, we were creating HLSs, we were doing underslung loads, we were doing distribution. There's a lot of training and understanding that needs to wrap around that to create a capability. We achieved it in Mozambique because we sent incredible people that did it and got shit done. The next thing to do now is to start putting a professionalisation around that so it can be consistently delivered again and again and again for the sector. And then we're talking about risk tolerances. And I've had this conversation with several of you around how we mitigate that risk, because risk acceptance is not okay, risk tolerance is. And we need to constantly assess where we're going, what we're doing, and how we mitigate that risk. Because I want us to be able to take more risk than any other organisation, but I want us to take that safely. So we always have to ensure that we are self-sufficient in our risk mitigation, that we don't heavily rely on too many external agencies or governments that we can't control. And the team's just doing an audit over what we learned through Mozambique and where the pinch points in that are and what we need to rectify. Clearly, we've got an operation going out to the Congo September time. There's an international emergency being declared around Ebola. Actually, the emergency has been going on. It was going on while I was there, but it hadn't been officially declared. But we need to ensure that if we're going to send people downrange into these locations, that we can look after them, that we TR wholly own that risk, and we can extract safely, that we can mitigate disaster, mitigate risk, etc. So that was the capability part, which obviously those are the operations we're doing. That's the capability we have to deliver to achieve those, and then how funding fits into that. As I told you, the pipeline is moving well again. Cash on hand is in a much better place, but it's tested my assumptions around how we fundraise here. This is something I touched on with you all 2 weeks ago, and those 3 focus lanes I mentioned is how we're going to move forward. But at the moment, the funding model we've had has caused operational restrictions. When we knew Mozambique was going to get hit, I wanted to pre-position a team in Johannesburg, but I couldn't because we couldn't take the financial risk. And to be always trying to raise money in the heat of the disaster when we should be focused on the disaster is too elastic. It's just not an act of war. So by creating this endowment that funds the infrastructure and allows us to deploy, and then we can raise, that's the way forward. We can still then use other philanthropy for restricted projects, like the things we're doing in Mozambique. So at the moment, the friction is in the unpredictability of our funding lines. Not just that, I just don't think my heart can take it. I don't think I could do another Mozambique because I should be focused on the op, but actually I'm just focused on trying to keep that money coming in. So that's where those 3 triangulation points are, and they're all in good shape. And actually, it wasn't until I started preparing the papers for the trustees this week and creating and doing that financial paper, I realised just how much we'd done this quarter, because it's just been nose down, absolutely living on the run to recover from that operation. I hadn't seen just what the team had achieved, and they've achieved amazing things. Claire Dakin and Joe Parsons in fundraising have been doing amazing work in Trust and Foundations, in that support squad, and in the ambassadors program, and then the operations team, shaking out from Mozambique, and now running the next training pipeline again, learning all those lessons into training. There's an amazing induction going on at the road right now, and I've got Bethan and Zoe doing a million jobs. It's amazing. It's a bit like the Blitz spirit. It's wonderful to see the team just leaning in for each other so much at the moment, and getting so much done against all the odds. And that's TR, right? That's who we are. We live on the run, and it's difficult because there's never enough. At some point, it will get easier, but then I fear it might get boring. But anyway, something we don't have to worry about right now. It's definitely not boring. And then I mentioned in the Ambassadors Programme, just to remind you, if I think I said it a couple of weeks ago, what that is. This is trying to bring in influential captains of industry, highly networked capital raisers to become pseudo part of TR, so that they help leverage their network for big funding opportunities. And those two big 20 millions I talked about, that is coming through the Ambassador Programme, being headed up by Nick Fothergill and Claire Dakin. And we had an amazing kick-off meeting last week. There's a grey shirt who's also part of the programme called Johnny Winnie Hussey. You'll meet him soon. He's amazing. He's just joined and he is like on fire trying to help build this Ambassadors Programme and leverage his own networks to bring in essentially the cash we need, because the restriction in we need more people to deliver more operations. The friction there is cash. We need to invest more in capability development. The friction there is cash. We need to be more agile in deployments. The friction there is cash. So that sustainable funding line is what unlocks all of those other things. But it's all moving in the right direction again. So it's an entirely positive update for you. But just keeping you, inside my thought process. Sorry, I don't normally look at notes, but I'm just scanning up my notes from yesterday, make sure I've covered everything that I want to bring you up to speed on. And then this Monday, I'm seeing Rory Stewart, who's Secretary of State for International Aid, head of DFID. Now, the chances are Boris Johnson will be announced as the leader of the Conservative Party on Tuesday, which means my opportunity with Rory might be very, very narrow indeed. But I am going to try and get a random act of kindness out of them as he's going out the door. That's my challenge, no pressure. And I'm going to be pitching at him this endowment model. The fact that this is what this organisation achieved in Mozambique with next to no cash because of the people that we have. Like, imagine if we can invest this and what this looks like, and walk him through that. To hopefully get a random act of kindness into the endowment. So it's Friday afternoon, tribe. I hope you've all had a great week. Looking forward to a great weekend. I'm actually going to stay on board in Chilmark tonight and go and hang out with the induction, because it was a great looking crowd. And there's some of the usual suspects from the Grey Ship base up there instructing. So looking forward to Bradders boring the tits off me with his stories later over a beer. Thanks for everything, tribe. It's been an amazing quarter, much better than I had even noticed. It's been absolutely remarkable, and in no small part, thanks to all of you. So look, have a great weekend. Speak to you all soon. Love you, tribe.